This is Holy Faith Media.
Silo.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. So we have a couple of announcements, which we're very proud of, and it's because of all your support over the last couple of years. So everybody knows, obviously, Jonathan Ross, Holy Faith Media. He has us going on the Frontline with Joe and Joe live, 8 o'clock Sunday nights, going across about 20 different platforms, which is awesome because our audience is growing on social media. You also might remember we told you we're on the Crusade channel on Mondays, and we still encourage, as always, everybody to do the free 30-day trial subscription for the Crusade channel, where you'll not just hear Joe and Joe on our Monday show, similar to what we do here, different stories, but you'll love the lineup there. Joe and I are now on AM radio, and starting next week, 1350 on the AM dial up in Connecticut, and Northern Long Island. It's got a reach of about 900,000 people. It's the Veritas Catholic Network. We're very proud that they've decided that they want to take a shot with Joe and Joe. They love our interviews, so we're going to be doing a 1 hour a week interview show on AM radio, and it looks like they're doing some very good things there. It is an EWTN affiliate, which we're also very proud of, and we know that that's news that you'd want to hear. Hi, Barbara. Barbara's always the first.
Love it.
First 2.5 years ago and the first now. Hi, Barbara. So we're on Veritas Catholic Network, and I would encourage everyone that you don't have to be in the Connecticut area or Northern Long Island. You could download the app, Veritas Catholic Network, and you could listen to all their programming wherever you are. Okay, so we want to, again, from our hearts, thank you all. It's your support with your prayers, financial support, which paid for our equipment, which enabled us to be on the radio. We're onward and upward. We're in Our Lady's hands, okay? We're staying focused on Jesus Christ. We're talking about the things that everybody needs to talk about, the politics, the culture, the church, everything, okay? And you all know that we're doing it, with our North Jersey style. So thank you again for joining us here. We have a great conversation, an important conversation tonight, because not for anything, Father Stephen Imbarrato, the protest priest, most of you know him, okay? Father Stephen Imbarrato has described Joe Biden this way. He said, Joe Biden is mocking us. Mocking us. Now, many might say, well, Christ was mocked. Yes, but Christ was mocked by the Romans. Christ was mocked by the Jews, okay? But Christ, people within Christ's circle were not mocking him. In other words, during his passion. Joe Biden is not somebody over there. Joe Biden claims to be a faithful and practicing Catholic. And he really is mocking us, okay? And I think I know Bishop Sticka, and Joe wants to talk about that. That's one of the stories we're covering. Talked about Joe Biden's Rosary show. That seems to be what he's all about. His Catholicism is here. What was it? The Susquehanna River, an inch deep and a mile wide. That's Joe Biden's Catholicism. I don't care if that sounds judgmental, and we feel like he is mocking us. And we want to talk about that. The White House will not answer questions. If there's one thing that you should know about Kayleigh McEnany when she was Donald Trump's press secretary, okay? Kayleigh McEnany answered everybody's question, whether it was Jim Acosta, whether it was others out there, a very hostile crowd. She answered every question. She was not evasive. This White House is not answering tough questions. They'll answer softballs. We know that, okay? But we're going to talk to you about Jen Psaki, all right? Who just refuses to answer any questions, particularly when she gets pressed on the issues that are important to us, like abortion and the Equality Act. So we need to get into her a little bit. We're pro-life. We focus on abortion, and we need to focus on abortion, okay? But remember, the culture of death, it runs the gamut from early life, okay, children in the womb, to the later stages in life, okay? So we need to talk about assisted suicide, and the Atlantic magazine, putting it up like it's a virtue.
It's sad.
It really is. So we want to talk about that. And then finally, we are going to talk about the secret to saving America. So this is an article in WND by David Kupelian, and we think he's been watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Because he's offering,
he should be.
He should be, because he's offering the same analysis that we are. What ails America underneath it all is the fact that we're letting all these people run rampant over us because we do not have our center, and our center needs to be Christ. No, that has to be the center of America. And it doesn't matter what the secularists say. Doesn't matter what the atheists say. Why are we obligated to give away America them simply because they're atheists or secularists and we're not? I'm under no obligation to do that, nor will we do that. So having said all that, we want to thank you for joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We're going to get right into it.
As Joe said, Tennessee Bishop slams Biden's Rosary show, and it's just that. It's a show. It's sad, actually. It's very sad. You know why? Because the Virgin Mary, as in the Blessed Virgin Mary, she's pro-life.
Think so?
It's sad. It's very, very sad. To give you a little background on the story, Bishop Rick Sticka of Knoxville, Tennessee, he slammed President Joe Biden for his frequent rosary flaunting, asserting that the Virgin Mary does not share his support for unrestricted abortion. This is a quote from Sticka on Twitter. So sad that the president likes to pull out his rosary and tout his devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, as he forgets another title of hers, Our Lady of Life. He likes to brag on his Catholic background when convenient, so very dishonest.
Yeah.
He's absolutely accurate. Just to give, again, some more background into this, Sticka was commenting on Biden's virtual meeting with the Mexican president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador.
When I read this article, when Joe sent it to me and I read the article, I knew we were going to talk about it tonight, I almost puked.
It's sad. I'm
not
so phony.
It's so phony. That's the reason why I almost let loose, okay? Because I'm listening to this going, do these people really think? Well, I know they think we're all stupid, okay, and we're all very easily manipulable. But listening to these comments of this president of Mexico and Biden, and they're talking about Our Lady of Guadalupe, I said, I wanted to ask Biden. Again, he won't answer any questions. He's not allowed to, okay? Jen Psaki won't. But say, do you even know the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe? All right. Do you even know about that rosary that you see? Remember, he claimed years ago, I'll shove my rosary beads down your throat. Forgot who he said that to because they questioned. This is like over 20 years ago. So I'll shove my rosary beads down your throat. Does he know what he's holding when he holds the rosary beads? Does he look at it like we do?
Our Lady Guadalupe is the only image of the Blessed Mother. She's pregnant.
Yeah, that's right.
She's pregnant. That's why she's Our Lady of Life. She's the image for the pro-life movement. She's a pregnant woman.
Right. And he's holding.
Well, it's an embarrassment. It's just, to be honest with you, any person who's Catholic who is worth their salt knows that. It's an embarrassment.
Well, answer again. I don't care if this sounds judgmental. Answer this question: any Catholic that supported Biden, I would ask them, "Do you pray the Rosary every day?" Because I would say, I don't. I can't see how you'd vote for Biden and you're holding the Rosary, which is a prayer to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ through the powerful intercession of His Blessed Mother while reflecting on the gospel. Okay, how are you holding that in your hand and then voting for the culture of death? And listen, we're just touching the surface. This is going to go on. Okay, we said this before. Donald Trump's not president. We're way beyond that. Okay, I hope people realize that Donald Trump is out. Joe Biden is sitting in the Oval Office, and we need to address Joe Biden represents the culture of death. He is signing everything as far as executive orders, and they're going to push it in the Equality Act and everything else. Everything is about death. Yet this guy talks about rosaries. Well, it is a rosary show. Well, Bishop Sticka is right.
It is absolutely right. This is what else Sticka had to say on Twitter. So how can you judge another on their commitment to the Catholic Church? Not their words do we judge, but rather their actions. Mr. Biden promotes unrestricted abortion. And what does he do today? Biden mentions Our Lady Guadalupe, shows the rosary in a meeting with the Mexican president. It is absolutely a conflict. It makes no sense. And what he said is very, very important. Our words don't define us as Catholics. You could go in the ocean. That doesn't make you a fish. You could sit in a garage. That doesn't make you a car. And just because you have rosary beads in your pocket doesn't make you a Catholic. Being a Catholic means that you believe what the church teaches and you put forth your absolute best to live it. Obviously, we all fall short. That's a given.
And to govern that way. See, you represent our interests.
The way it is, and this is a bishop calling it out.
I don't understand this about Americans. How is a Catholic politician who I vote for, let's say, who is pro-life, is pro-family, is against all this culture of death and all this nonsense, how is he supposed to go to, well, how do you expect, you atheists, you secularists, you modernists, you liberals, you expect me to vote for somebody who's going to vote against my interests? No, my representative has every right to vote according to his Catholic teaching and his Catholic faith, because he represents me and the people that voted for him. Okay, so how in America is that somehow, if you're a secularist atheist congressional district and you vote for Jerry Nadler, he could go there and he could vote for things that are in your interest. But if I vote for somebody, let's say like Chris Smith in New Jersey, okay, who's pro-life, somehow that's not legitimate because Chris Smith is Catholic and he's pro-life. No. The Constitution says nothing like that. Let's dispense with that nonsense once and for all. They represent my interests, and my interests are babies not being slaughtered in the womb and the protection of families, amongst other things.
Well, it's what's it called? It's also a scandal. Canon 915. Basically, Joe Biden is a person in the public square. He's different than me. I'm not like a person high on the scale in terms of like the spotlight. Like, I'm not in the news. I'm not like, he's the president of the United States. He puts himself out as a Catholic because he is a baptized Catholic. Joe Biden's a baptized Catholic, but he's causing scandal. There's confusion. And frankly, let's call it like it is. Bishop Stick is doing his job. This is what the bishop should be doing. He's calling him out on it because it is an embarrassment. And again, I can't stress this enough. Christ is not interested in what we say. He's interested in what we do. He's interested in what we do. And we pray the rosary. Christ doesn't tick off boxes like you prayed 10,000 rosaries, Joe Resinello. The rosary is supposed to comport you to the teachings of the gospel to then live them. And Joe Biden, he could carry rosary beads in his pocket all he wants.
Right.
His life, meaning the way he governs as the president, is not comporting to the gospel. And what I mean by that, his position on aggressive abortion. It's not just abortion, it's radicalized abortion.
Real quick, we said before, okay, it's one thing. See, there is a distinction. We don't agree with any pro-choice position. None. So I want to be clear about that. But there is a distinction between Rudy Giuliani, let's say if he was president, and Joe Biden. Rudy Giuliani self-identifies as pro-choice. We certainly, vehemently disagree with him, okay? But what you're not going to get from Rudy Giuliani is a reversal of the Mexico City policy or radical liberal judges, okay? Giuliani will say, yeah, I think abortion should be legal, but I'm not going to really do anything about abortion. So he's pro-choice. Biden claims to be pro-life, but says, I don't have a right to impose my values on others. Number one, that's a nonsensical lie that a lot of people have bought into. We've broken that down on the show before, okay? You absolutely have the right to impose your values on others because that's what the law does. So give us a break, Senator, Vice President, and now, I guess, President Biden. Give us all a break. But there is a difference. Biden is aggressively pro-abortion. That's the difference between him and a Giuliani. He is reversing the Mexico City policy. He does want overseas funding of abortion. This Equality Act has a big part of it has to do with abortion and Planned Parenthood. He is aggressive in his promotion. He's not just kind of like, well, if abortion's legal, it's legal. I'm pro-choice, whatever. No, he's aggressive in promoting baby killing. So we got to get that through our head. There is this distinction to be made. He is not personally pro-life.
And he is not. I would even go.
And again, by his actions, as you said,
that's all that matters.
By his actions, he's not personally pro-life.
I would even go so far as to say this: if you are going to confession regularly, say once a month, if you are receiving the Eucharist every week when you go to Mass, and you're praying the Rosary every day, he carries the Rosary beads in his pocket. Let's assume he prays it. There is no way you could be pro-choice.
He couldn't look at himself in the mirror.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like oil and water. God wouldn't permit it. You see, there's certain things, gifts of the Holy Spirit, one of which is infused wisdom. There is no way fortitude, we can go on and on. There's 7. Anyway, there's no way you could take that position and be doing that. Like my wife and I were talking about the scandal in the church with regard to priests abusing young men. The priests that did, it's definitely a minority. Actually, the problem in the church, sadly, a lot of priests who did that are homosexual because they weren't children; they were post-pubescent young men. So it's a gay situation. Break it down, look at the John Jay study, 82% of the people who were molested were post-pubescent, which means they were from the ages of 12 to 18. Anyway, another story for a different day.
Right.
The point of the matter is this. There is no way a priest who engaged in that type of behavior, and I want to juxtapose that with what Joe Biden is doing, if he's going to confession, if he's praying the Rosary every day, there's no way. Something broke. That stopped, and the person went left.
Right.
Joe Biden, something snapped. Like, he's not going to confession regularly. He's not receiving the Eucharist in a state of grace,
well, that
obviously.
Would be,
and listen, something broke.
That would be like, let's say, for argument's sake, now the church teaches, let's take adultery, okay? Obviously a mortal sin, okay? You go to hell if you're not repentant, if you're an adulterer. Let me break it to all the homosexuals out there. Nobody's singling you out. Plenty of sins can send you to hell, okay? Adultery is one of them. What about the guy who, let's say, for argument's sake, he loves his gumad? That's Italian for all you for his girlfriend, all right? But his mistress, okay? So guy's married, got kids, but he's got a gumad on the side, all right? And he goes to confession. Now, maybe he runs his business very well. He does a lot of things well, feeds the poor, stuff like that. Perhaps he goes to confession. Do you really think? Let's say he's a serial adulterer. He's not giving up his gumad. He's not confessing that in the confessional. And if he is, he's got no intention of giving it up.
Well, even if he does confess it and he doesn't have an intent to stop it, you're not forgiven.
Right. So the thing is this. But now, the reason why I bring that up is this. If I'm cheating, God forbid, my wife would hit me over the head with a rolling pin, and a lot worse, okay? But let's just use, if I'm cheating, I'm not bringing that to the confessional. I'm not. I might confess all my other sins. I used foul language. I did this. I did that. I was jealous or whatever. Okay. I'm not confessing that. I guarantee you, I don't know because I'm not in the confessional. Guarantee you, Joe Biden is not confessing his aggressive support of baby killing because he doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. And as Joe said, if he doesn't think there's something wrong with it, then something is broken in him. He is not receiving.
It's a fact.
If you possess God's grace, if you are, in possession of God's grace, okay, in a state of grace, there is no way you could be in favor of that. No way whatsoever.
Well, again,
you can't.
A good priest,
unless you're misinformed. Let me be fair to people.
You can't be, at this point, he's not misinformed, and a good priest would guide him in the confessional.
Right.
It comes to a point where you accept the guidance or you don't. I mean, I'm sure that there have been clergy along the way. I'm sure of it, because there are good priests and there are good bishops. I am sure someone has whispered in his ear somewhere along the way. Joe Biden has made a conscious choice. And I got news for you. Again, I'm not God. I don't know who goes to heaven and who doesn't. That's not my
we
bag.
can't say.
But what I can say is this: it's an objective mortal sin, which means subjective means I'm making a decisive decision, as in God making the decision. It's an objective mortal sin, meaning on paper, tick the box. You're in favor of abortion and you're legislating that as the President of the United States. Objective mortal sin. I don't want to be you, Joe. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to stand before God with that on my hands. So again, I pray for him. I pray he's a Catholic brother. He's baptized. I pray for him every night by name when I pray the Rosary with my wife for the conversion of the President of the United States.
We'd be hypocrites if we did not. We would be hypocrites if we did not. But this is my point. I try to give him the benefit of the doubt. Very difficult to do. Okay, very difficult. I've resigned myself. The best I could do for Joe Biden is from my heart. Pray for his conversion. Okay. But this guy, he's about to, he's already lost half his marbles. He's about to lose the rest of them.
He's close to the end.
Okay? He's close to the end. He may be on the point where he can actually repent because he's losing his mind. So you have to have your faculties if you repent. Okay? You have to know that you're repenting. You have to know your sin and you have to repent of it. He's losing his mind. He's nearer the end of his life. He's being manipulated by Kamala and all these other people, okay, that are surrounding, and Barack Obama, okay? This guy is in desperate need of our prayers, okay? Desperate need. The other thing, too, we should mention, I know this get us in a little bit of trouble, but the priest who gives him Holy Eucharist, that priest got a problem, too, because that priest is not ignorant. Let's be real, okay? Archbishop Wilton Gregory, is not ignorant, okay? He knows the score, and he's perfectly willing to give Joe Biden the Eucharist. I would tell Archbishop, we all can read. I know that you're a bishop, okay, but we all know how to read. We could read the canons. We could read the catechism, okay? You're wrong, Archbishop, and you should deny Joe Biden Holy Eucharist for his own good. For his own good.
But that's his deal, too, and he'll stand before God on that as well. I mean, with those who've been given much, much is expected. You don't take a position like that just to wear cufflinks and be a big shot. That goes for being the President of the United States, or that goes for being a cardinal. A lot of responsibility falls upon you. This is what the Director of Human Life International, Father Jerry Porkowski, recently stated about Biden. He said, Biden is the most aggressively anti-Catholic president in history. Despite his,
say that again, Joe.
Biden is the most aggressively anti-Catholic president in history.
I'm going to let you go, Joe, but think about that. The second so-called Catholic president in American history is the most anti-Catholic
These are not
president.
my words. This is the head of Human Life International.
But also look at his actions. Look at Richard Gus Levine, okay, the man who thinks he's a woman who's going to be number 2 at HHS. Look at Biden's nominee for number 1 at HHS, Javier Becerra, anti-Catholic. Neera Tanden just withdrew her nomination, another anti-Catholic. He's got all anti-Catholics. Trump at least had Catholics. Good, like Kellyanne Conway and people like that around them, okay? This guy has all the anti-Catholics around him. So I wanted you to keep going. But think about that. Think about the profundity of that statement, okay? The second Catholic American president is the most anti-Catholic president in our history. And there's been a lot of anti-Catholicism in American history. We pointed out that on the show many times.
So Father Porkowski goes on, despite his external shows of piety, he wrote an essay on February 26th. This is what he said. His ostentatious displays of devotion, in spite of those, Biden's habitual and unapologetic sinful acts are on full display, the priest asserted, and his support for evil is ongoing and unapologetic. This is also what he said, and this goes to what I was talking about with actions. The words of Jesus are foreboding. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. St. John echoes that very thing. He says in his gospel, he said, if you proclaim to say that you love God but don't love your neighbor, you're a liar.
Right.
And if you're actively pursuing a rabid abortion position, you don't love your neighbor. That is not an act of love or mercy. I'm sorry, Mr. Biden. I'm just telling you. And listen, who am I? Ignore me. You're 77 years old and you're not even in good shape. You are close to the end. If you do hear my voice, I say this to you, as John the Baptist said, repent.
Repent.
Repent. You don't want to. And here's another thing with regard to his repentance. Joe Biden, because he's the president and because of the position that he took as the president of the United States, his acknowledgement has to not only be in the confessional. If you ask me, if I was the priest, it has to be public.
You have to make some sort of a public statement.
He has to make a public statement.
Not for all his sins.
But
for that, for
he
what
has
is
to renounce what that would be the penance.
That's a public sin. See, Joe Biden's personal sins, like his private sins,
that's his business. That's his business. Priest.
You know, and that is what he brings to the confessional. I have no business knowing, okay, about that. But his is grave public sin, and that's why he has to make a statement to say that I recant of that position that I've taken my entire life. No, not his entire life. He used to be pro-life.
Since the 80s.
Since he became a senator. Gee, there's a shot. Look at Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy was pro-life. Ted Kennedy was staunchly pro-life, okay? All of a sudden he changed. Because when you need the backing of Planned Parenthood and big abortion and their money, this is what happens. Joe, can we address somebody in the comment box? This is important. Joe and I say all the time, you know this about us, okay? We love talking about politics and culture. We do it around the kitchen table. That's why we do it around your kitchen table, okay? But ultimately, Joe wants to evangelize the culture. Do our part, whatever we could do. Tiggy is in the chat room, okay? Tiggy, listen to your brothers. Listen to your brothers over here, okay? Tiggy says, I was in the process of converting, but the church didn't call out this evil, so I'm out. Tiggy, don't let that happen. Don't let that. We're Catholic. We see them not calling it out, okay?
Some call it out.
Many do. Bishop Sticka, okay? Or Bishop Strickland, okay? Or Salvatore Cordileone, or Athanasius. Listen, Tiggy, you're only hearing about the ones who are most vocal and who the press is going to cover. Remember that, okay? The vast majority of priests are good, solid priests. The vast majority of the world's bishops are good, solid bishops. Unfortunately, they're bullied and they're harassed, and a lot of things happen that we don't know about, and it's very difficult for us to judge. But here's the thing, Tiggy. The church is the church, not the men in it. The church is the body of Christ. The church is still the place where you get the grace of the sacraments, the Eucharist, confession, all of it, okay? So, Tiggy, we would implore you, okay, don't let these men chase you out of the church. It's our job to stand up and open our mouths so that people like you come into the church, and a lot of Catholics who are thinking about leaving stay in the church because you realize there's a lot more good in the church than bad. We just need to point it out. So you're going to be in our prayers, Tiggy, that you continue the process of coming into the Catholic Church. And if you need any help from Joe or I, okay, our email is frontlinewithjoeandjoe@gmail.com. All right, just say it's Tiggy. I want to and ask any question or any way we can help you, because that's what we're here for. First and foremost, that's what Joe and I are here for.
So I think that was an important conversation.
Let's give a couple quick shout outs, Joe, because we got a bunch. I can't get to everybody. Red Hat Ducks in there, Ragna, William, Colin, Joyful, Lisa, Ed, Michelle is happy. Michelle's happy. We're happy that Michelle's happy. Michelle, we're happy for you. Casey, female Casey Royals fan. She's become a regular. Tom Gugliotta's in the house. Love it. Seraph's in here. Marie, John Boy. Hey, John Boy. John Boy, plays good music. John, you should put your Facebook name in the chat room so people see the music that you do. He's a guitarist. Bonnie's with us and a bunch of others. Cosmic. So you're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, way in the breach, Sunday nights at 8 o'clock. We are live, and please like us on Facebook and YouTube, and subscribe, share, hit the little bell, do all that fun stuff, and Holy Faith Media. Like Holy Faith Media. Jonathan Ross, he's our boy. So let's move on.
White House won't say if Biden will force Christian doctors to perform abortions and gender surgeries. We're going to get into the back and forth with Jen Psaki, with an EWTN reporter. Bottom line, why won't they answer the question? Because they know it's a loser. You see, a lot of their agenda is they can't say it publicly, and yet they're aggressively pursuing it. They cannot say this, that they're going to force Catholic doctors or force Orthodox Jewish doctors or force Mormon doctors or force Islamic doctors to perform abortion, which goes against their religious beliefs. Because if they say that, objective Americans will not be for it. But by the way, that's exactly what they're doing. That's what the Equality Act is all about.
Oh.
So let me get into the back and forth, and we'll have our conversation.
And by the way, we're going to encourage you all, okay, because Joe and I are going to be doing some hard-hitting interviews when we're on Veritas Catholic Network, to download that app. Our first interview, which is going to air next Sunday, is going to be exactly about the Equality Act, and we're going to be talking to the best guy to talk to that about, the president and CEO of the Catholic League, Bill Donahue. And we're going to break it down. We're not just talking about boys in the girls' locker room. There's much more to that bill that all of you need to know. So Veritas Catholic Network, download the app. Joe and I will be going on next Sunday, 5 o'clock. So you'll be able to listen to us, and then we'll do our social media show at 8 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday. But Joe's right. This Equality Act is monstrous and evil. Evil. So go ahead, Joe.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki would not say when asked by a reporter from EWTN. The reporter noted concerns that pregnancy discrimination measures in the Equality Act, which has passed the House, would force, pay attention to this now, would force doctors to perform gender transition surgeries and sterilizations, again, even if it violates their conscience.
Let me stop you right there for 1 second. Joe, we just got done saying Joe Biden says, I'm personally pro-life, but I don't have the right to impose my values on others. But he'll sign this legislation which imposes their values of baby killing on a doctor who wants nothing to do with baby killing.
Is that American?
And is that American?
That's what I would say.
And here's the lie,
I don't think
Joe
it is.
Biden. Here's the lie. You say you can't impose your values on others, but you want the government to impose your values on those doctors and nurses and medical professionals and say, I don't want any part of sterilization. I don't want any part of contraception. I don't want any part of doing radical cosmetic surgery on a man who thinks he's a woman, or vice versa. I don't want any part of this, and they should, in their conscience, be able to be protected, and their conscience rights should be protected. Joe Biden's not in favor of it. He'll sign this. He will sign this legislation in a New York minute.
He's actually said that he wanted to sign this within the first 100 days of his presidency. That's why they're aggressively pursuing it. But then basically the reporter goes back. He says...
now, by the way, this is an EWTN reporter. Mm-hmm. Very important to note, okay? Now, I don't know how the heck an EWTN reporter got into that place, okay? No, seriously, I'm shocked by that. When I read this article, I was like, there's an EWTN reporter in the press room. However, but this reporter pushed back. Joe's going to tell you about that.
So basically says, what does Biden say about those concerns? Again, would doctors be forced to perform transgender surgeries and sterilizations?
Now catch this answer from Jen Psaki.
So she says, Joe Biden, it's just deflection. She says nothing. Typical. Joe Biden has been a long supporter of Roe v. Wade. It has been his consistent belief that it should be law, and he will fight to continue to protect that being law. The reporter pressed further and said, conscience concerns. Is that a concern of his? I think, again, I'm just going to state that the regime's policies, that's my words, I call it the regime.
The regime. It is a regime.
This is what Psaki said. That's the regime's policies. Do you have another question? The reporter continued.
The reporter didn't quit, and you got to listen. Jim Acosta, for every Jim Acosta, there's somebody else who's got some stones who's going to put the screws to Jen Psaki and anybody else who wants to stand up there. And this reporter pushed again. Go ahead, Joe.
Will Joe Biden keep the Conscious and Religious Freedom Division at the HHS, the office that it was put in place by President Trump?
Evil President Trump.
Keep it in place to receive conscience complaints from those doctors.
Now catch this answer.
She says we'll have to talk to future Secretary Becerra once he's confirmed.
First of all,
He's not confirmed. He may not be.
He may not be
He
confirmed.
shouldn't be, if you ask me. He's a.
Some people, Joe, have said, well, what's with this idea that, opening your mouth or speaking the truth? We need action. And we said, first and foremost, how are you gonna actually mobilize for any sort of, let's say, real political action, not Antifa BLM picking up guns and Molotov cocktails, okay? Real political action, real and peaceful political protest, but effective political protest if you don't open your mouth first. You got to open your mouth. You have to lay the groundwork. In a battle, okay, you have to send mortar shells to soften the enemy. Then you send in the troops. And in this battle, the mortar shells are the bombs that we drop, and many people out there, all right, all you good people, because you're in the comment box on a variety of different platforms, okay, with a lot of different speakers. The first thing you got to do is soften the target by refuting and debunking their arguments. And then, yes, going on to attack their positions. Becerra might not, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is this guy was considered a shoo-in.
Well, we're going to talk about that at Crusade, but here, keep this in mind.
He ain't a shoo-in.
It's not even the fact that his position is radical on abortion. What a lot of people are saying about Becerra, he's not a doctor. He's a lawyer. The only reason why Becerra is given this position is because he's an attack dog. He's not. He's being put in charge of the Health and Human Services.
Right. His only experience
no background
with HHS is suing HHS.
Right. He has no background, and that's what a lot of the senators are saying. They're basically, forget about ideology for a second. He's put there to be an attack dog to push things like the Equality Act. He's not going to be working actively, let's just say, on health care issues. That's the type of person you put a medical doctor who has maybe an administrative background or someone in the pharmaceutical industry to maybe craft healthcare solutions. That's who should run that. Even Barack Obama did that. That woman from Kansas that ran it under him. I can't recall her name. But I believe she was a doctor. She was
not Sebelius.
Yeah,
was it Kathleen Sebelius?
Yes,
another one.
But I mean,
winning
at
Catholic.
least she had a background. This guy has no background, and that's the talk. But on another note, this is the type of stuff. This back and forth. The reason why we picked this story and want to convey it to you is this: she asked a great question. This reporter, great question. They wouldn't answer it because they can't answer it. You see, this is what makes this regime radical. These ideas are done in the middle of the night. They cannot put them forth to America. And the press sure as heck isn't going to cover this. Because even objective, middle-of-the-road people who are not woke on either side of the aisle are not going to be for you forcing a doctor to do this. It's a loser, and they know it, and they can't say it.
You want to know what I don't know this is a stone cold fact, but I'm going to say it as a stone cold fact. If you took everything on their wish list, pick the top 20 from abortion, gay marriage, all the way on down. I'm talking about environmental stuff. I'm talking about taxes. I'm talking about all of it, okay? Every single thing on their wish list, take the top 20 and put it to a referendum to the American people, and I guarantee you they lose on every single one of their issues. That's why what Joe said is just so true. They have to do all this stuff in the middle of the night. They won't have a real debate. Look, Rand Paul, we covered this, but I'm going to remind you. Rand Paul said to Richard Levine, okay, the transvestite who's going to be the number 2 at HHS, said, was going on and presenting an argument against genital mutilation of minors, and then citing the UN, again, the UN, but the UN, the World Health Organizations, other nations, okay? And Levine just sat there and said, well, Senator, gender science is nuanced and ongoing, and I'd be happy to come to your office and we'll talk about it more. And Richard Levine went on to repeat that twice when Rand Paul doubled down on it. That's all you're going to get out of these people. I'll come to your office, we'll talk about it. But in the meantime, yes, Javier Becerra did sue the Little Sisters of the Poor. He, by the way, lied about that. He flat out lied. The lawsuit was the state of California versus the Little Sisters of the Poor, not the state of California versus the Catholic Church. It was versus the Little Sisters of the Poor, okay? So let's get that straight. So my point is, like Joe's saying, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to answer anybody's question in an honest way. And again, I'll go back to Kayleigh McEnany. I found her to be very honest. She was very honest. She was very forthright. She had statistics. She had arguments. She had everything. She took every question from Jim Acosta and from this one and that one. She did it like a champ. This broad, Jen Psaki, she's just going to do the talking point. Well, you know, Senator Biden. He's a devout Catholic. Let's circle back. He's a devout Catholic, and he's staunchly in favor of Roe versus Wade, and I think that answers your question. And the reporter went, no, it doesn't answer my question. What about imposing his values on the doctors and nurses that don't want any part of abortion? They're not going to do it. And by the way, I mentioned their wish list. They won't do it on anything. They don't want to debate real scientists on climate. They don't want to debate any real economists on taxes. They don't want to debate anything involving abortion, gay marriage, transgenderism, none of it. Because the American people will be able to see it, and the American people will be against it.
Liberalism is a disease. It doesn't work.
It's a disease of the mind.
It's a disease. I'm sorry. I was talking to my wife about this last night. Look at every city that has for decades been run by ultra-liberal politicians. Mm-hmm. Financially, they're in ruin. Crime, the education system is horrible. It is a disease. What makes it a disease is people keep voting for it, and they don't look solely at the fruits it bear. You know a tree by the fruit it bears. And at the end of the day, if something's bearing rotten fruit, try something else. But people don't. They continue. They have this delusional idea that this works. It doesn't work. I'm sorry. It doesn't work. And they can't even communicate it to you truthfully because they know when you start saying things like, I'm going to let boys play in girls' sports. I'm going to let boys shower in girls' locker rooms. I am going to allow a doctor to kill a child one day before the child is born. I'm going to allow a 14-year-old girl to cut off her breasts and not tell her parents or make it against their wishes. They can't say these things because they will be turned on by the people. So what do? What Jen Psaki does not answer the question, yet aggressively pursues those agendas.
Because the wider media is not going to shed any light on it, and they know they have their allies in the wider media that aren't going to point out what Joe and I are pointing out and many other people, is that they're not answering questions. CNN will just say, Jen Psaki, she's just so brilliant. And of course, by the way, a Democratic regime, that's where all the brilliant people are, according to CNN and MSNBC. They're the enlightened ones. We covered the elites last week. They're the enlightened ones. They're elites. They're just so. Oh, look at Jen Psaki. She's so brilliant. And by the way, she's so beautiful. Isn't she so beautiful? Right? Like, that's the way they talk. They don't want anything. Kayleigh McEnany, by the way, in the looks department, crushes Jen Psaki. But aside from that, okay. But again, I'll go back to Kayleigh McEnany and Donald Trump. You didn't get anything but honesty from them. I don't care what the left says. If a question was asked, they got an answer. They got a truthful answer. They got an honest answer. They just didn't like the answer. And they didn't like the fact that the wider media had to cover Donald Trump, or else what the hell were they going to cover? All right? So Trump's honest answer is getting out there to the wider audience. That's why, again, we're not going to get into some things that will get our buddy deplatformed, okay? But this is what you're going to get from them. And this is what the left has been doing for decades. And let me tell you something. The Equality Act takes this conversation to a whole different level, especially when it comes to free speech and what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. So they're going to keep it under wraps. They're going to keep it in the dark. They got their allies in the media, and they're just in Hollywood, and they're just very happy to continue to do that. And like Joe said, they'll just keep pushing that legislation. Hopefully, we get people that are going to stand up. Look, we're not covering it tonight. Put enough pressure. Neera Tanden, perfect example. Okay, Democrat hack that Biden put up for OMB director, okay? She withdrew her nomination. Why? Because some guy showed some stones and said, you know what, Miss Tanden, you're a nasty woman. They didn't call her that, okay? But said, you know what, all these tweets that you said Donald Trump was the bad guy, you had 3 times as many tweets, and yours were infinitely nastier. And she tried to take him down and scurry. She couldn't get away with it. So you know what she did? She backed out because Susan Collins and Joe Manchin both came out and said, I can't support her.
You see, but
That's why you got to open your mouth.
I can't even give them credit on that, because then they basically confirmed Cardona for the education secretary, and he's for boys playing a girl sports, which is a disqualifier right off the bat. These people are clueless, and these are the people that represent us. It's embarrassing. I don't even consider myself a Republican. When people tell me what's my affiliation, I'm a Catholic. I'm a Catholic that votes, and I vote according to my faith. That's it. I'm not a Republican, and I'm not a Democrat. These people don't represent me.
Right.
You're going to vote and nominate a man that's for boys playing girls sports. And by the way, a whole handful of them, including Mark Rubio, including Marshall Blackburn, she didn't vote. She abstained. So you know something? You don't have my support. So you're worth nothing to me. And that's on our show tomorrow. But this is very important. We covered this on the Crusade channel. This is, to be honest with you, something you should track on your own. And I don't think the mainstream media is going to cover it. And that's kind of what we do. We try to present things to you that are kind of outside the realm of the mainstream media. This is something that passed the House. It's called the H.R. 1 bill. It's called For the People Act. This passed the House. It passed 220 to 210. It was a House-led legislation. It was only debated for 6 days. And basically what this is trying to do here is it's aimed at federalizing the U.S. elections. You see, our elections are run by the states.
As outlined in the Constitution.
What this is trying to do is they're going to say that the federal government is going to run the elections. Now, let's break this down, because this is very, very important. And by the way, the vote was by party lines, 220 to 210. Hans von Spakovsky.
That guy's got some name.
That's quite a name.
Hans von Spakovsky.
Oh, there we go.
Now that's something right out of like a Frankenstein novel, like Hans von Spakovsky. Well, like he's gonna crush your head or something.
This dude is from the Heritage Foundation on election law reform. This is what he had to say basically about this. Well, actually, let me give you some background before I get into Hans here. I think I want to break down, because not everybody's versed in the bill itself. It's an 800-page bill, okay? And it would grant Democrats the power to overhaul state election processes and impose new regulations on political advertisements and donors, giving Congress ultimate supervisory power over federal elections. While Democrats tout the bill as a way to strengthen voting rights, many critics, including former Federal Elections Commission officials and privacy activist groups, express their opposition to the legislation because its susceptibility to partisan control and other provisions, such as public exposure of citizens, private donations, and nonprofits, and we're going to break this down, this is kind of legalese, and other organizations. Congressional Republicans are also concerned that the H.R. 1 would permanently alter American elections for the worst. You see, this is the danger. I'm going to tell you this right now. Donald Trump, in this election, what happened, let's not talk about, issues of inconsistencies here or there. Let's talk about what happened before the election. Non-legislative officials changed the rules.
I.e., governors, secretaries of state, and state Supreme Court justices.
Changed
who
the
have
voting rules.
No authority.
And that's what happened. We're not talking about fraud. We're not talking about cheating. I'm talking about facts. That happened. What they're saying now is they're going to take that away from the state, and we're going to federalize it, and the Congress is going to run the presidential elections.
Now,
go ahead. And basically what they're saying is partisanship now could be put into place. So if you have a Republican running the Congress, they could use their arm to influence the election across the whole country, but also Democrats. Let me break down what Mitch McConnell said that this is going to do. And one thing I want to particularly focus on, this would force all 50 states to allow the absurd practice of ballot harvesting. This is what ballot harvesting is. It's a practice that allows political operatives and others to collect voter ballots and turn them in mass. So basically, I would go around to all my towns, like neighbors, pick up their ballots, and I would turn them in for them. What if I changed
That's
the
illegal.
mail-in ballot?
That's illegal.
I could do that, right? That's not a control mechanism. It's a bad practice. They're saying that is permissible.
Isn't that opposite of a control mechanism?
Absolutely
that's
not.
opening up the door for fraud.
Number two, they're saying that they would forbid states from implementing voter ID or doing simple things like checking the voter rolls against a change of address submission. Listen, that to me right there, I'm an auditor. I was an auditor for 15 years. I'm not an auditor anymore. That's a red flag. You ever go like with your credit card and you travel to Delaware and you go to lunch and all of a sudden you get a phone call? Like, this is outside of your normal practices of spending. You just bought something for $17 in Delaware. Did you lose your card? As an auditor, if you said that you want to take away voter ID, what I would say is simply this. Why? What do you have to hide? You have to show ID to buy cigarettes. Cigarettes. This is an important thing. It's a practice. When I vote in New Jersey, what I've always done is I drop my license down and they have my signature on an old voter ID. I sign it and the person in front of me looks at my ID and look, this is how it used to be. And then they look at my signature. What is that? That's a control. They want to take voter ID and address change submission. They want to take that away. Why? Why would you want to do that? What says to me is you're opening this up to fraud. I'm not saying you're cheating, but what I'm saying is the potential to cheat is greater than if that control was in place. And lastly, they want to mandate no excuse mail-in ballots as a permanent norm. This sweeping federal takeover would be exactly the wrong response to the distressing lack of faith in our elections that we've recently seen. Now, I want to make a point on this when I read this. This is the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, and this is why I don't consider myself a Republican. They nauseate me, and so do the Democrats. But this is the difference. The Democrats have a killer instinct and the Republicans don't. The Republicans, day one, after the fiasco that took place in 2020, should have immediately put forth voter reform, whereby a non-legislative official cannot change the rules of an election before the election itself. It's like changing the rules to a football game before the football game goes on. It basically saying like, no, we're not going to have 100 yards. We're going to use 80 yards as the field. Wrong. That's not the way the game is played. This is the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, and this is why the Democrats win. Because the Republicans do not have a killer instinct. Not only did they do what I just said, and I'm not talking about fraud here. I'm talking about inconsistencies, and I'm talking about non-legislative officials changing the rules of the game before the game was played. What do? They double down, and they try to pass this, and they do pass it. Now it's in the Senate. My point is, if this happens and this passes, it's over.
The country is now California.
It's over.
California, the Republicans, nobody's going to tell me that California is as liberal as the elections would say. California is, everybody knows this, by the way. This is not conspiracy theory. California is completely rigged for the Democrats. Republicans cannot win the state house. All right, and it's very difficult for them to win the governorship. Okay, so we know this. The question I was going to ask is, so this is obviously unconstitutional. According to the federal constitution, this bill is unconstitutional because a state, take Pennsylvania, could turn around and say, you're not going to tell us what, let's say the state legislature, not the Supreme Court, not the Secretary of State, not the governor, the state legislature, which has the authority under the federal constitution when it comes to elections, the time, manners, and places of elections, says, no, this law is nonsense. You're not going to tell us what to do. We have this authority. Here's my, let's call it, foreboding question. What the hell is John Roberts going to do? Because this is going to get filed, Joe. You're going to have a number of states. Okay, forget about Pennsylvania. Forget about any of the states that were in question during the after the election. Take the other 27 or 30 states let's say for argument's sake, that have state legislatures that are Republican, okay, or that are sane, or even Democrat ones that say, I don't want my power taken away from me. All right, let's say a state like Illinois, okay, I don't want my power taken away from me. Somebody's going to file a major suit against this legislation, and here's again, it's a question. I'm not giving you an answer. Okay, is what's John Roberts going to say then? Because this law, obviously, on the face of it, needs to be struck down by a sane Supreme Court. Because this is obviously going to be challenged. If I'm a state legislator, I'm going to get with the state legislature and the Democrats. If I'm a Republican, I'm going to get with the Democrats and say, do you want your power taken away from you by the federal government? Because that's what they're doing. There's going to be, again, it's a question. I don't know. Obviously, John Roberts didn't want to get into any of this. But something tells me that if this thing was to pass the Senate, which I don't think it will, I don't think it's going unless they end the filibuster, I don't think it will. And even if they do, I don't think there's a few Democrats are not going to go for this. Okay, this is really, really radical. But if it was to, God forbid, okay, again, I'd love to hear your comments. What's John Roberts going to do? Michelle is happy. Oh, wait a minute. Is it Michelle is happy? Yes. Well, Michelle says, don't riot and burn, will be civil. I think she was responding to somebody else. Hey, Colin. Colin says, nothing, Joe. Roberts sold out. Haven't you been saying that?
Oh, he's an institutional man. Right. That's like I said, I'll be honest with you. I'm interested in the truth. I'll be truthful with you. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm interested in the truth. And like I said, I'm a Catholic. That's how I vote. I vote my faith. And none of them are perfect, the Republicans or the Democrats. I have voted for a Republican mostly because of social issues over the last, say, 20 years. But to be honest with you, I bring that difference between the two. Day one, the Republicans should have put a stop to what happened. They didn't. Yet this group of people doubled down. You saw what happened on June 6th, and it was very sad that you see a group of people died going into the White House. That was a sad display.
The House of Representatives.
Yes.
The Congress.
The reason why that happened, they say it's Donald Trump. The reason why is this. People did not have faith in the elections. They didn't have faith in the elections. It was predicted before the election.
Yeah.
Many people said it.
Yeah.
Many people said it. Mail-in balloting is a flawed process. And who said it? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter and Jim Baker did a study on it. It's a flawed practice. They're Democrats. Before this,
Baker wasn't. It was bipartisan.
Okay,
Baker was in the Reagan administration.
Okay.
But it makes it even better. It was bipartisan.
Perfect.
And they both agreed. They said mail-in ballots lead to fraud.
So that's why you had that situation.
Right.
People didn't have faith. This will add to it.
Yep.
Okay? Like, let's take our partisan hats off for a second. If this was to pass, this is going to add to it, which means it might be worse next time. And here's another thing. Don't think that the Republicans can be any different. They can manipulate this. Things change.
Right.
20 years, it could change.
Right.
You could have a Republican House, and they could change the rules and make it harder for you to vote. This is a bad practice.
That ain't American.
This isn't American. And by the way, non-legislative people should not make decisions for the people that vote. That's what happened in states. That was not an American idea. Obviously, it's because of COVID. It's because of COVID. Well, guess what? Because of COVID, your kids aren't in school. And they're not going to be for the rest of the year. And who's going to be hurt by it the most? The poor.
That's right.
Because they don't have high-speed internet. They live 10 people in a 2-bedroom apartment in poor cities around the country. They don't have fancy computers. They don't have tutors. And they're going to fall behind.
Yeah.
And they're the people you say you stand for, which is a lie. Now, let's look at what Laura Bohart had to say about this.
Real quick. Suzanne's in the chat room. She says, the bill is unconstitutional. If it gets to the Supreme Court, they have to shut it down. Right, Suzanne. The question one more time is, do they have the stones to do it? And I think our point, you may agree, John Roberts doesn't seem to have that type of backbone. He does not. Go ahead, Joe.
Basically, Laura Bohart, she's a Republican from Colorado. This is what she said about the act. I love this one piece on it because she talks about language. She said, they call this For the People Act. No, It's for the Swamp Act. This is something that will federalize our elections. It's a DC takeover of our elections. This is going right to them controlling the language. They act like it's something that's great for you. They act like all these things are wonderful for the American people when they are not. And we just broke that down for you, particularly around the ID. What sane person does not ask for an ID when a person votes? Let's, again, take your hat off, your Republican or Democrat hat off. You're going to tell me that that's fine? No. I am sorry. I am sorry. And no one is going to stare me in the face and say that that's legit.
Right.
No one. And if you're putting that in there and I'm putting my auditor cap on, not my Republican cap, I'm instantly saying you are opening the door to fraud, and you're doing it on purpose. You're taking away a control. That's not a good practice. Bohart goes on. She said, get this. This is another piece of this legislation. I couldn't believe this. I didn't know this when I read this. It's pathetic. She says, a major pillar of the legislation is setting up a new public financing system for congressional and presidential elections to incentivize small donations. Oh, that sounds real nice. But wait. The legislation would establish a 6-to-1 match for each grassroots contribution. So, if you give $200 to the president, the taxpayers would match it by $1,200.
6-to-1.
So, taxpayer money is being used to fund election campaigns. No.
Yeah.
No. I'm not voting for that. That's in the bill. This is what they're trying to pass, and it passed the House. No one's covering this.
Right.
This is why we're telling you. This is nefarious garbage.
It's why, I mean, it goes back to what we said. It's why we're here, and many others out there, right? It's like, if we don't get shut down by Facebook and YouTube, all right, we're going to keep saying it. It's like, because if we're not saying it, you're not going to hear. I don't even know. I haven't watched Fox News since November 4th. Okay, what was the election? November 3rd? Was it the 3rd this year? This past year? It was November, whatever. I haven't watched Fox News since the day after the election. And I will probably, somebody put it in the chat room, said, I'll watch Tucker on YouTube. Yeah, I catch clips of him and Laura Ingraham on YouTube. I will not put on Fox News. So I doubt Fox News is even going to get into the meat and potatoes the way a lot of people in social media are. That's why you got to ditch the news. You can get, listen, if you go on the top, I found this out in the process of, our show's evolving, and we find that we have different resources and things like that. So I look at, let's say, for argument's sake, the top 100 conservative websites. Okay, now there's others. Okay, then I try to pick and choose, and I go through it. One thing I found: you do a good search of those sites. Start with Breitbart, Federalist, go right down the line. LifeSite News, who by the way just got shut down on YouTube. LifeSite News, Life News, National Review, all the way down. Some more conservative, some less conservative. And you go right down the list, you'll find that you've gotten all the news. In other words, what you're getting is analysis by good writers. People use David Marcus for an example. Excellent, excellent writer. Spot on. He might be watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe. But if you do that, what I have found, and the reason why I'm telling you this, okay, what I have found is I don't have to watch the news. I mean, I was watching Newsmax and a couple of others, okay, but I don't have to watch any station for news. Now I read the news in the process of doing research for the Frontline with Joe and Joe, but there's many articles we read that we don't cover here, but they're news, they're newsworthy, and I get my news from them. And I don't have to give my ratings to Fox or anybody else. And I'm not any less informed because I do it that way. I don't have to sit there like a couch potato with a thing of popcorn and a Johnny Walker Black, looking at Laura Ingraham or Tucker Carlson. I catch them on YouTube. But then, I read most of the news. By the way, I got to point out, though, because I mentioned Kayleigh McEnany and I said that she crushes Jen Psaki. So just so everybody knows, just as an aside, okay? So my phone's right over here. My wife texted and she said, "What are you talking about?" Sorry, babe. I'm sorry. Right. I was just commenting. I'm making a comparison between Kayleigh and Jen Psaki. But anyway, yeah, so we can get our news from a lot of different places. We do not have to put any money in their pockets by watching their channels.
So pay attention to that HR 1 bill. It's going to the Senate. I think it's one of the more nefarious pieces of legislation. And again, it shows you the difference between the feckless Republicans and the cutthroat Democrats. It's absolutely evident. It's evident. And if this passes, I don't think it's going to, because they need 60 votes. And if 10 Republicans vote for this, I'll be honest with you, I may just friggin' retch in plain English.
I doubt they're going to.
But
they'll be out of a job.
Oh.
They'll be out of a job. They're from red states, Joe. They will be out of a job.
But just the mere fact, read what is being put forth in the bill itself. This is dangerous. It's dangerous, and we will see worse violence in elections to come if this is to pass. Worse, because people will feel disenfranchised, and that's when people go nuts. That's what happens in banana republics, and this will make it official. We are then officially a banana republic.
And we don't want to be a banana republic. So you're listening to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossano. I just wanted to point out, so Mark is in the chat room, and also somebody else mentioned it too. Monic mentioned Epic Times. Yes, Epic Times. Good paper, good writers, and they cover a lot of good stories. Absolutely. And our man Tom Gugliotta, he turned around, he says, Bannon, love Bannon. We think that he should actually team up with Trump, put a few $1 billion, raise a few $1 billion, and create a new multimedia company. That's what Trump should do. Trump should not run for president or Speaker of the House in 2 years. Trump should get together with Bannon, raise a couple $1 billion, and create a new parallel media company, multimedia company, that's going to combat all of them. So we all have social media, and we have a rival to the legacy, what they call the legacy media, okay? But thanks for commenting. So at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, where are we headed next?
We're going to talk about the Atlantic and assisted suicide. There's a lot in this. Basically, this particular article talks about some doctors who push euthanasia, describing the experiences. These doctors are from California, who assist people in suicides. I want to read you just a small clip from this article. Joe has a little bit more of the meat and potatoes from it in terms of the exchanges from the doctors. But I bring it up because this is a sad, sad state of affairs. And this breaks this down because a lot of people don't know about this either. This goes on in other countries, assisted suicide. And I also want to get into the mindset of a person who would want this, because a lot of secular humanists are absolutely for this, and I'm going to tell you why I think they are. But this is what a piece of, I'm just going to read you a small excerpt. It basically says, in most every place where assisted death is legal, such as in Canada and in Belgium, euthanasia there, as I just said, is legal. This measure that patients can choose, they can choose between two ways to die: a drinkable solution or an injection delivered by a doctor. Patients almost always choose the injection. They want their doctors to take care of things. Also, the shots are straightforward and quick and always work. No stress about mixing the solution, no chance of vomiting or waking up, which can happen with liquid drinks. So, Belgium and Canada. Jonathan Ross, who's our producer, is in Canada. This is legal. Why would someone want to do this? Okay, this is what I wanted to explore when I read this. Because they don't believe in God, and suffering is something that has no meaning to them.
No meaning.
You see, Christ gives meaning to suffering. My father just died recently. He died in December 16th. He was bedridden for 18 months. He had Parkinson's disease. My father was a pretty good guy. He wasn't a saint, but he was a pretty good guy. You say, why did he deserve this? I don't know. But God gives meaning to suffering. When you believe in Christ, Christ was a man, and he suffered and died for our sins. He felt everything we felt. He was hungry. He was tired. He experienced everything except sin. Christ gives meaning to suffering, and those who don't believe in Christ don't understand when suffering happens in their life. So, they have no problem with this, because their life, at this point, they say, I can't do anything. The world looks at you as a consumer. They don't look at you for who you are, and that is a child of God. The world looks at you solely as what you can produce. You're a line on an Excel spreadsheet. The minute you can't produce, the world has nothing to do with you. That's why we kill our old, and that's why we kill our babies in the womb, because they can't do anything. They have no meaning.
And primarily, too, as we've covered many times on the show, Down syndrome children.
There you go.
Okay. If they're born, they're going to be just a drain on society. It's like you want to tell them, shut the F up. What are you talking about? It's a human life. Okay, he or she has a right to his or her own life. But you hit the nail on the head. That's what materialism leads to. By the way, both the communist version and the capitalist version. When you take a materialistic worldview, euthanasia, no problem with that. Doctor-assisted suicide.
What does that Zeke guy say?
What's that?
That Zeke guy, Zeke Emmanuel, at 75.
Oh, 75 years old. He goes, you should just, call it a day. At
Can't produce anymore.
Can't produce anymore. Who the hell are you to tell someone? My mother's 81 years old. Come near my mother, Zeke Emmanuel. You might be meeting your maker. You're going near my mother. Okay? And it won't be me that does the end. It'll be her. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But I was going to say, basically, I could just speak personally. What did I learn from my father saying in a bed? I learned that my mother loved him. She took care of him. They were married 51 years. I witnessed what real love is. Love isn't like what you see in Hollywood. I got news for you. That's love. 51 years of marriage. She took care of her husband. She stood next to him when he died. I saw my children go and see their grandfather every single Sunday. They witnessed our family taking care of our father. Great lesson to be learned. I also saw the value of my father's life and considered it a privilege to see it. So I learned something. I learned what real love was. We also gave a great example to my kids. There is a value in suffering. See, we push it away. Suffering is one of the tools that God uses actually to comport us to his will. It's a tool, actually. Mother Teresa said, our suffering is a kiss from the cross. You see, secular humanists can't understand that.
Can't wrap their heads around it.
And they push it away. And that's why they're for this. Many people will say that. They'll say, I'm about to die. I want to die. I don't want to suffer. Well, I don't either, actually. And if you want to suffer, and if you're Catholic and you want to suffer, something's wrong with you, actually. You're a masochist. But when suffering does come, and it does come to everyone's life, you accept it. Because it has value. Because, we're not perfect. When you peel the onion, there's a lot of flaws in even the best of us. So God uses those things to comport our life to his will. And that's why a Catholic embraces suffering, as my father did, and a person who doesn't believe in Christ doesn't, and is for this. And the difference is they're trying to impose this on you.
Right.
With a federalized healthcare plan. I'm not for it.
Nope.
That's all I'm going to say.
No, you're exactly right. And let's remember another thing, too, while we are talking about God and God's love for us and suffering, okay? I don't know why people suffer. I don't know why Joe's father suffered. I don't know why many people suffer. But here's one thing I do know full well. God is very well aware of our suffering because he went through it, too. Any Catholic has to accept that. No matter how much you say, well, my father this, my mother that, why do good people... We get it. I get it. I understand. I don't want to see anybody suffer. But don't ever think that you can't say as a Catholic that God does not know our suffering because the second person of the Blessed Trinity entered into our suffering. So it's one thing that you can't say as a Catholic that God does not understand our suffering. And as Joe said,
he experienced
if through God's suffering, right, through the suffering of the second person of the Blessed Trinity, you got to remember something. Obviously, that suffering had value because we're redeemed by his blood. Without the suffering, no blood. Without the blood, no redemption. All right? That's just the way it is. That's a consequence of sin. That's the way it is, okay? If we got that around our head, we'd understand God allows these things to happen for a reason, the same way God the Father allowed God the Son to be sacrificed on the cross and go through that suffering. That's one thing I do know. I do know that. And every Catholic needs to understand that God knows exactly what it is we're going through because he experienced it himself. But I want to talk about a little bit more of Mossy Man is in the chat room. He says, joining the church. God bless you, brother. Or if you're a brother, if not, well, yeah, Mossy Man. Okay. So you're a man. And if Joe and I can help you in any way, Frontline with Joe and Joe at gmail.com. All right. Any questions you might have. But God bless you. Joining the church. But I want to talk a little bit real quick. I don't want to belabor it. We're already over an hour, so I think we have one more story.
Yeah, this is a good one too.
We got one more story. But just so you understand where a lot of this goes, like when it comes to this assisted suicide. See, my thing is this. I know this sounds callous. If you want to kill yourself, do it on your own. Don't enlist society to support you, because I'm not going to support you. I'm not going to support you taking your own life. I'm never going to do that. Okay? Ever. Okay? And I don't want you to impose that on society. If you want to kill yourself, look, people have committed suicide for a very long time, all right? So the bottom line is you could do it yourself, and you don't have to make it part of the medical profession, because there's nothing health related in the fact that you want to kill yourself, okay? In fact, you want to end your life. So don't enlist the help of doctors and other people through the law and then make us pay for it, I'm sure. I'm sure that's coming. But here's the thing. This was very quickly. This was in the Atlantic piece, Katie Engelhart. She mentions this guy. His name is Shavelson, Lonnie Shavelson, and he's been doing assisted suicide, and he's been enthusiastic about it for years and writing about it. And he was a part-time ER doctor and a photojournalist, and he wrote a book called The Chosen Death. Now, here's the thing. I want to read you a paragraph, and just so you understand why this cannot be allowed, because there's nefarious people involved in it, okay? This is Katie Engelhart, who's quoting the book, A Chosen Death by Shavelson, and the woman Sarah is from a group called the Hemlock Society.
How nice.
Probably a suicide, like I guess referencing Socrates who drank the hemlock. Anyway, and what happened when this guy who thought he wanted to die, what they did to him, okay? Now catch this. Quote, this is a guy who's asked to die, okay? Gene is his name. Gene's good hand flew up to tear off the plastic bag. Sarah, Hemlock Society, Sarah's hand caught Gene's at the wrist and held it. His body thrust upwards. She pulled his arm away and lay across Gene's shoulders. Sarah rocked back and forth, pinning him down, her fingers twisting the bag to seal it tight at his neck as she repeated, "The light, Gene. Go towards the light."
This is insane.
Now, this is something out of a horror movie, okay? Gene's body pushed against Sarah's, then he stopped moving. Close quote. Here's the punchline. Not only did Shavelson not try to stop Sarah, okay, but he never called the police about the killing. Rather, he just described sitting there watching, wringing his hands. This is what you get. This man, Gene, thought he wanted to die. But then he had remorse. He decided not to do it. He started to fight back, and this woman killed him. And the guy who witnessed it didn't even call the cops to say he did not want to die anymore, and she killed him. She prevented him from tearing the plastic bag off his mouth. This is the type of crap that we're going to have to deal with, the type of evil that we're going to have to deal with when it comes to accepting, of course, euthanasia and assisted suicide. So remember, pro-life, it's not just at the beginning of life, it's also towards the end of life.
I can't even believe that. That's absurd.
I was sick to my stomach when I heard that, because I said, why is this woman not in an orange jumpsuit, Mr. Shavelson? Why didn't you report it to the police now? Why didn't you give them her name? Gene's dead. She killed him. He obviously didn't want to die, and you let it happen. You're like a little girl, Mr. Shavelson. You sat there wringing your hands. You should have gotten her and threw her off the man and ripped the plastic bag off and said, Gene, do you want to live?
Oh, God. It's so
no,
sad.
They killed him. Yes, because if you're complicit in murder, you're guilty of murder. So Mr. Shavelson should be in an orange jumpsuit too.
This is a real and that's again stuff that's not talked about. And a lot of people are fine with it because they don't want to suffer. Federalized healthcare, you will have this. It's happened in the UK. We covered it. Charlie, what was his name? The little boy in the UK happened to
Charlie Gard.
Yes. This is a fact. It's part of the deal. So, and that's why one of the reasons I'm not for it. They have to do something for healthcare. That's a fact. That's a fact, because you can't. It shouldn't be a privilege of people who have good jobs that they have health care. Got to do something, but I'm not for the government taking over health care, because I'm not for that.
Right.
And that will happen. Don't let them lie to you.
And it
does happen. In the UK, it's legal in Canada, it's legal in Belgium.
Real quick, Joe,
Sorry.
before we leave, this was Wesley Smith that was writing this article. I like the way he put it. All in all, this is a splendid, dark example of how the media is continually pushing euthanasia and assisted suicide. No opponent. This is what we talked about earlier about doing everything in the dark. Okay, no opponent's voices allowed, and no doubts about the agenda entertained. The article says Shavelson is quitting his suicide practice. Good. Go back to taking photographs, Death Doctor. That's the way Wesley Smith put it. Exactly. They do things. They just want to do it. They don't tell you the truth about it, and you just have to accept it. And, of course, the media is on their side. I don't know who was in the chat room. It might have been D. Cox. Hey, D. Cox, how you doing? He said, satanic. This stuff comes straight from hell, man. Comes straight from hell.
This is a great article. It's from David Capellian. It was called The Secret to Saving America. There's a lot of aspects to this, and I know we're going on a little longer, but I think it's important. This was a really, really good article, and I think we should cover it. Basically, this is what he says, Capellian had to say. He said, the United States of America is in the throes of a full-scale revolution. The new administration, which openly promises to transform America, rewrite her constitution, and reimagine all of her bedrock institutions, is being heralded by a shockingly totalitarian censorship campaign targeting everyone in opposition, from Donald Trump on down. But this revolution is not new. For decades, our nation has been under covert, slow-motion assault by what we call the far left, a religious political movement.
That's important. They are a religious movement. Go ahead, Joe.
Fundamentally at war with both Christianity and America. From the sexual revolution and the marriage is legalized rape radical feminists of the 1960s, to today's open love affair with socialism, sexual anarchy, abortion, identity politics, radical environmentalism, and defunding the police, the left has relentlessly pursued its goal, as Barack Obama put it, of fundamentally transforming the United States of America. You know, I'll tell you what, they don't believe in what this country stands for. They don't believe in it. They try to rebrand it, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next segment from this article. They don't believe it. And it's sad, because America, with all her warts, is by far the greatest country in the world.
But you can't have a good country, or you can't have people like us and people out there thinking that, no, we actually hey, look, Joe and I have a real problem with America. We allow baby killing up to the moment of birth, along with 7 other nations in the world like China and North Korea. So we have a problem with America. We love our country. We think our country's on a very, very bad path, but we want to change things with the truth. See, this is the important distinction to be made in what you're saying. We want things to change, but we do it with the truth. You know, that we speak the truth about abortion, about assaulting the family through genderism and gay marriage and all of it, and a lot of different things that we cover here on the show, through education and the way that African Americans are enslaved by a public education system, okay? So we want things to change, but again, Barack Obama and his ilk, they change things with lies. They want to turn what's good in America into what's bad, and they want what they do, which is obviously and demonstrably evil. You talk about diabolical when you look at their agenda, and they want you to believe that that agenda is what America needs so that America could be good. So what would you get? We just got done talking about assisted suicide. Old people dying, young kids dying. Forget about if you're a kid and you have any sort of illness, diabetes, Down syndrome, and from A to Z. You got that, you go too, okay? You're 50 years old and you break your hip, you're not getting a new hip. That's it, you're done. They're going to give you 2. Obama said that. In other words, they'll give you 2 pills, go home and die. Not in those words, but that's really what he said. He said that about older people. So they want to take all these things, they want to impose it on everybody, and then they'll call America good. Then they'll call America good.
Meanwhile,
in the meantime,
they cement power with themselves.
Right. In the meantime, what is good about America okay, they want to say is actually evil. Do you see how devilish it is? Somebody put in the chat room, when you call evil good or good evil. Let's go through this a little bit, okay? Now think about this. This is a great article. I'm glad Joe found it because Mr. Capellian hits the nail on the head, and it's just what we're talking about. Just think about this last year, okay? So you have big media, big tech, big education, big Hollywood. I would throw in big abortion, okay? And the Democrat Party, this is what they've succeeded in doing. Now think about this. Indicting the freest, most welcoming, and least racist nation on earth is irredeemably racist. You're deplorable, okay? Because they want to make us all out to be racist because we want to secure our border and we want a flow of legal immigration into America as opposed to anarchy and chaos, which is going on at the border. They incited violent Marxist revolutionaries to riot, vandalize, loot, and burn in America's major cities, okay? That's what they did.
Can't deny it.
Right, can't deny that.
Talk to Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yes, all right? Go watch the Remnant video. Michael Matt, he's up in Minnesota. He says that beautiful city, the Twin Cities, destroyed. Okay. Now remember when Bill Clinton, I want to see abortion safe, legal, and rare. Safe, legal, and rare. Remember safe, legal, and rare?
Gone.
That's been gone for a while now. But they've abandoned their former safe, legal, and rare stance on abortion in favor of wanton celebration of late-term abortion up to the moment of birth and beyond. We're not going to get into him in this show, okay? And there's a lot to get into about this guy. But when you talk about disgrazia Governor Cuomo from New York, yes, Mr. Capellian's words are correct. Celebration, when he signed that law saying that babies could be killed up to the moment of birth, they were standing behind him.
Doctors do not have to perform abortions.
Right. Some witch doctor, some midwife down the back of an alley can perform an abortion.
That is a back alley abortion. When you're going to tell me that a woman in New York State in the 8th month of pregnancy can have an abortion. You ever see a woman who's 8 months pregnant? I have 4 kids. I've seen it up close. And you're going to tell me a doctor does not have to perform that abortion? That's absurd.
That's if you even accepted. Even if you consider yourself, which we do not, pro-choice, even if you accept the pro-choice position, you don't look at the woman and say,
no, but that's what I'm
a fully
saying.
Developed baby inside of her.
No, but even
I can't be for that.
From an objective, again, forget about like your position on it. Just from the woman's health perspective,
right? She
could die
easily.
I mean, she's not this is not a doctor. She's fully pregnant.
Right.
You're going to say that a person who didn't go to med school could take that baby out of her womb?
I thought it was about women's health.
Oh,
I thought it was about Joe. I thought it was about women's health.
And this is where, and I'm glad Joe's going down this list, and there's a couple more things in it, but I just wanted to say this. These are the examples. Joe's saying, like, the left, like Barack Obama, they radically want to change the country. Their positions are nefarious. These are nefarious positions. He's telling you what they are.
Right.
You see, this is where, and I'm going to tell you this. You ever get into a political discussion, I don't want to say an argument, you start throwing this at people, they have nothing to say.
No.
Nothing to say.
Or
they go turn around, they hate you.
Or they're true believers. You're right. You're absolutely right. Or they're true believers and they say, no, that's exactly what we want. That's exactly what we want. No, so keeping it going a little bit, encourage this. I mean, everything we said so far is nauseating, but catch this. Encouraging innocent children to irreversibly ruin their lives by chemically and sometimes surgically transitioning to the opposite sex. By the way, a scientific impossibility. Dr. McHugh said that, right, at Johns Hopkins University. We covered that in one of our first shows. All right, Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Paul McHugh, okay? Yeah, that's right. So they said, Dr. McHugh said if a woman, let's say for argument's sake, has plastic surgery and gets shot up with all these hormones, she's just become a more masculine woman, but she's still a woman, and vice versa for a man. You could do all the surgery you want. You could cut things off. You could do all these things. If you do that and you're a man and you think you're a woman, you're not. You're simply an emasculated man. So that's science. That's not us. Okay, we're always told, Joe, we have to follow the science, follow the science. Well, that's Dr. Paul McHugh, who's smarter than everybody, let's say, in the room as far as that's concerned. And, of course, they don't want to hear about that science, okay? So you look at all this. And then and you just have to shake your head and you say, this is their agenda, and they think that this is what's going to make America great. Like if they had their own MAGA, Make America Great Again agenda, what I just read to you, that would be their agenda.
And again, these are facts that we're basically giving you, and the mainstream media doesn't touch on those facts because they know objective people, whether you're Republican or Democrat, the average person that lives on John Q. Street or Boulevard in pick the state, even the most liberal states are not for these things. Yet this is what's being pursued. This is what's being pursued. Now, here's the question now. What can good Americans do about this precarious state in the country?
Why do I like that you're going this way? Again, we always want to go out of our way to remind everybody. Every show we do, there's a lot of people complaining and there's a lot to complain about. But there are solutions. And the problem is that a lot of people out there are looking for political solutions for which there are no political solutions to these problems. There is a spiritual battle going on. It manifests itself in a culture war that if we won that battle, that will affect our politics in a very positive way. So we always emphasize, and that's why unfortunately I cut Joe off there because I want to emphasize to you, it's about solutions. And Joe's going to tell you the first and foremost solution.
And this is from a practical perspective. In everyday life, Americans will have to bear up with grace and dignity in fighting the good fight. Citizens, the ultimate sovereigns in Americans' unique constitutional system, who may be tempted to drop out of politics, must do the exact opposite. Vigorously exercise their sacred rights of voting, free speech, free association, freedom of worship, and to petition the government for the redress of grievances in every legal and moral way. One final and all-important point to make. Unlike virtually all other nations, the essence of America is not a common ethnicity, but a common spirit, a grateful, liberty-loving, generous, essentially Christian spirit, which needs to burn more brightly now in America than ever before. You know, I saw something, I think it was I don't follow basketball anymore. I love basketball, but I don't follow it because the NBA makes me nauseous. But I saw a picture in the news of LeBron James that said, vote. If I saw him, I'd say, I agree with you. I want everyone to vote. I do. Every single person in this country, I want everyone to vote. But you have to have controls around the voting. That's all I want. But I want you to vote. I'm not trying to disenfranchise everybody. Anyone can go to vote. But you got to drop your ID. You got a signature check. You got to show where you live. And then you vote.
You're racist. That's their only answer to what he just said. You're racist.
Is that a horrible thing, what I just said? But what we're talking about...
In their eyes, the way, again, the way the media spins narratives and everything else, exactly. The answer is yes. What you just said is horrible, hateful, and yes, of course, Joe Rossinello, you are racist.
And we have to, what this gentleman is saying, again, this is David Capellian, he's basically saying, you can't just say, well, the battle's lost. You got to show up, you got to vote. You got to vote, you got to make your voice heard. That's number one. That's from basically the secular perspective, what we could do within the state. Now let's talk about the spiritual battle, because it is a spiritual battle. Christ commanded us, let our light shine before men, always praying we can wage the battle righteously, and even praying for our enemies. Christianity, very important, has historically grown during times of persecution, not only in numbers, but in depth and sincerity. America, we're coming on some very tough days, with much persecution directed towards those who dare to speak the truth. But if good people stand up for what is right, for their nation, for what is legal and proper and moral and good, and if they do it with faith in Almighty God, that He may be glorified and His will ultimately will triumph, they absolutely can't lose. Someone said something, they said, they asked Gandhi this about Hitler. Because Gandhi, basically, he defeated the British with not a gunshot, nonviolence. He said, could Hitler have been changed by doing that? He said, not without suffering, tremendous losses, but yes, he could. You see, the truth always wins out. God always wins. There's a saying, man will have his hour, but God will have his day. This could be 100-year period of America. It could take 100 years. But if good people stand their ground, basically continue the fight, that means suffering, though. It could mean a very, very dark period. It's happened in other countries. Ultimately, the truth will prevail. It always happens that way.
Can I give an example?
Sure.
Because when you think about it, in this country, all hope is not lost. It's far from lost. Our institutions are not wrecked and destroyed completely. They're damaged. They're damaged, no question about it. That was very deliberate by the left. Look at the people of Poland. I think it's a perfect example. They first they were under Nazi thumb, the Nazi thumb, okay, and then then they were under the Soviet thumb, okay, and those people had no institutions, okay. Everything was destroyed because the communist, the Soviet system, there were no intermediary institutions standing between the individual and the state. These people had no redress of their grievances. They had no free speech. They had no free association. If they tried to do that, they got sent to the Gulag. That's Poland. For 50 years, under the Soviet Union, they won. Why did they win? Because in 1979, John Paul II went there and he celebrated Mass, and a few 100,000 people with all the communists looking over everything started to chant, "We want God. We want God," while Pope John Paul II, Saint Pope John Paul II, was celebrating Mass. And the communists knew they would. George Weigel says the communists knew they couldn't win. Do you see that we don't just speak out of our you-know-whats? We give you an historical example. Those people had nothing. We have far from nothing. We have everything. We have all our institutions. We have an internet. We can fight against these people. We still have a government. Okay, if you want to look at, look to the government. We still have a government. We still have institutions. We have a lot of avenues. What we need is to bring God back into the equation. That's what the people of Poland did. That's what solidarity was. We got the backing of Pope John Paul II and Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and they defeated the Soviet Union. But God was first. We are nowhere in such desperation as those people in Poland were. Nowhere. Yet they won. Why did they win? Because the victory was God's. We could take an example from history. And Poland is probably the strongest, morally speaking, the strongest country in Europe right now. Okay? No, especially when it comes to abortion and all this nonsense.
Because they suffered.
Because they suffered, and then after their suffering, they asked God for his help, and he answered them.
The truth always comes out in everything. It always does. Like Joe said, you could name historical example after historical example. It will. It always does. So, basically, stand firm. Remember the words of Christ. The battle is won. Christ resurrected from the dead. Now it's our turn to do our part. Whatever that part is, it could be a small thing. It could be prayer. It could be speaking the truth. Everyone has different gifts. It could be just voting. Voting your conscience. Purifying your heart by going to confession. Living a sacramental life. Witnessing the Catholic faith to your children. These are the things that will change America. I want to leave you with two scriptural passages, and I think, Joe sent them to me when we were talking about putting this article together, and I thought it would be a good way to end the article as well as the conversation. This is from Romans 8, verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to them who love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. All things work to the good, even if they're bad at the time. God knows what he's doing. Life is a mosaic, and in the end, God's triumph always, always stands firm. And lastly, become blameless and harmless, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom ye are seen as lights in the world. The light of God is not ours. We have to receive it. We cannot give what we don't have. That's when we pray the Rosary. What did Our Lady do in the Joyful Mysteries? In the Annunciation, she received Christ, And in the visitation, she gave him away through humble service by visiting her cousin Elizabeth. We have to go to the well to get what we don't have, and that is God's grace. We do that by presenting ourselves in confession and receiving the Eucharist in a state of grace, and then we go forth in the world and give it away. That's how we change the world.
I couldn't think of a better place to end the conversation. So we want to thank you all for joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. So remember a couple things, okay? Crusade channel on Mondays. Please, we encourage you to do take it. Tim Ross, who's the producer of our show, but also our Frontline with Joe and Joe pages, which are primarily right now on Facebook and YouTube. I'm in the process of building other pages, which I'll let you know about. So we want to thank you all for your support, mostly your prayers and your financial support. Patreon.com/the Frontline with Joe and Joe. If you want to drop in a couple bucks, okay, and become a subscriber for as little as $5 a month. We won't beat you over the head with that, but it is available to you if you want to support us in that way. And remember, until next week, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening.